let's talk about emojis. So I looked it up today, and there are over 3,600 emojis, but that includes the different skin tones and genders. That a lot of them, are repeated, but that's a lot of emojis, and each one has a name. Each one has a usage, and the question, really, the hypothetical question was: do people use the emojis as they were intended? Does the sender know that the receiver who got the emoji understands it in the same way? And so it was kind of like the hypothesis being that most emojis people understand and have a good idea of what they mean. However, there are times when we don't really interpret it in the way that the person sent it. So that's where the miscommunication happens. So when we talk about communication, strengthening communication, we really have to talk about the agreement on symbols, and words are symbols. Language is a set of symbols. One thing about studying sociology is there's a lot of definitions, a lot of concepts, and we all have to agree that we're understanding the concept within the discipline of sociology in the same way. So when I use intersectionality, you understand what that means. If I use social stratification, you would understand what that means. So any discipline in and of itself is going to require that you learn a set of symbols, and that's true in the way that we communicate with each other. Now, these are the actual emojis that were used for the survey, and the names are from the Emojipedia. This is where I found the names and I found the definitions of them. And these were the 7 names: the thinking face, the lying face, squinting face with tongue, upside down face, sad but relieved face. So the relief, that's an interesting one. And face with crossed out eyes, and confounded face. So when we hear like a word like confounded, what does confounded mean? Do we understand that? Like, to me, if I need clarification on a word, I look it up in the online dictionary. I used to have a paper dictionary, but I look it up in the online dictionary because I want to make sure that I'm using the word in the right way. And I think that's a good practice to do, but I think we should also consider doing that with emojis as well. So what I've done is I've gone into the Google form and I have pulled out and extracted and put into a spreadsheet the answers. Now, I've attached that as a PDF to this announcement so that you can go in and see for yourself, because I don't want to read everything. But going from the top down, we have the first emoji. For example, the first emoji was thinking face. Now, the names were given were ponder, thinking, wondering, curious, thinking. So everybody really interpreted that one. Now, on the other side of things, which I found interesting, was the face with crossed out eyes. And we have deceased. One says yikes. One is dead emoji. So shocked. Dead. Something crazy just happened to me. And flabbergasted. So here's one of the interesting things about this survey is when asked on the survey to name the emoji and then describe, for example, name the emoji and discuss where this emoji might have originated. So it wasn't just definitions, but maybe the origin of it, where it came from. The lying emoji. Everyone has some, at least in this society, has some familiarity with Pinocchio, and probably beyond because of the global reach of Disney. But everybody gets the lying nose, the nose growing, and that's an interesting piece of kind of, popular culture, if you will. We also have this idea of emojis looking different depending upon what operating system you use. So if you have an Apple versus a Samsung, and interesting variations, they all are going to vary depending upon the operating system. So is that going to mean that the emoji that you sent, for example, is the emoji that the person receives. Are they going to really interpret it in the same way? So bottom line is, if you're sending an emoji and you're not quite clear, it might even be kind of fun to go in and, most of us maybe use a certain number of emojis repeatedly. Things like food, tacos, and objects, the taco, right? Objects and those kind of things. I think those are pretty self-explanatory. It's the facial expressions. It's using the nonverbals. The hands, if I was to pull the hands up, just the hands, where you have evidence of them shaking, what does that mean? What does this mean? When do you use that? But it's the facial expressions of these emojis, I think, that have the greatest variance in interpretation. So, check out the kind of the way that these were explained and see, the idea was like for you to really challenge yourself to see how would I interpret that if someone sent this to me, and how might this change the intentionality of which I send a message with an emoji. But I find it fascinating and appreciate the 9 people who got the survey filled out. It's about 27%, because it did close on Friday, because then they have to close it out, and then you have to pull the data and you have to arrange the data. So there's things that have to happen after the survey. Any survey has been administered. Usually, if you put a survey out there and you don't put a deadline, it's just going to linger and you'll never get to the results. So if you ever use Google Forms for a survey and you put it out, give people a time to really hard deadline to get that survey back, so that you can do the analysis and draw conclusions. And again, this was just a way in which you could understand a little bit about how research comes to conclusions, and how we can actually, even in our day-to-day, find some answers about things that clue us in, especially when it comes to communication.